Marineford was absolute cinema. An emperor taking on the world government, all to save one man? It nailed the importance of family, not just for Whitebeard, but for Luffy too. And just when we thought Luffy had done it, Ace was finally freed. You got the emotional gut punch that still haunts me to this day.
No, God!
But what if that moment never happened? What if just before Akainu landed the fatal blow, Ace didn't take the fall and someone else did? Let's be real, we all know that someone wasn't going to be Luffy. Man's got enough plot armor to survive a spirit bomb or a Sangan and being cancelled on X. But in this timeline, Ace survives, and survival comes at a price. So that begs the question, what if Ace survived Marineford? To rewrite Ace's death, we don't need to change the whole war, just the pivotal moment right before Akainu goes for the kill. So let's first take a look at who could have taken Ace's place. First up, the most obvious candidate, Jinbei. After all, right after Ace's death, Jinbei's the one who literally shields Luffy from Akainu. He even outright says he'd give his life to protect him. Ask any fan who'd take the hit for Luffy, Jinbei's the top answer, and honestly, he'd do it, but that's almost too expected, so let's go a bit deeper. The second candidate would be Whitebeard himself. He doesn't die until after Ace, so it's entirely possible he could have jumped in and taken the fatal blow instead. Whether or not that's plausible is one thing, whether or not he would is a whole question entirely. After all, Ace is Whitebeard's son, his 2nd division commander, and Luffy is just some wildcard with a straw hat and a death wish. So would Whitebeard really lay down his life for someone he barely knows? At first, probably not. But then you remember, Whitebeard isn't just a captain, he's a father. Even if Luffy doesn't mean much to him personally, he knows exactly how much Luffy means to Ace, and for Whitebeard, that's enough. If saving Luffy means giving Ace a second chance, he'd trade his life without hesitation. Besides, let's be honest, at this point in the story, Whitebeard had so many tubes hooked up to him, he was basically a walking dialysis machine. An honorable death in battle for the sake of the next generation? Now that's how you create a legacy. Now the third and final candidate is easily the least likely, but maybe the most fascinating. Garp, the hero, Vice Admiral, Luffy's grandfather, Ace's adoptive grandfather. At Marineford, he's the embodiment of emotional paralysis, trapped between duty and family. Could Garp have saved Ace? Yeah, the man could have folded Akainu like an origami if he wanted to, but he doesn't. Sengoku even tells him, "I never asked you to step in," because everyone knows how conflicted he is. And that's what makes Garp's role so compelling. If he had acted, if he had sacrificed himself, we would have lost one of the most powerfully restrained character arcs in the series. His silence is the statement. His inaction is what makes that heartbreak real. And if Garp dies here, we would lose one of the coldest scenes in the entire war. A living legend, a broken grandfather, holding himself back from destroying a fellow admiral. That's not a death scene, that's a masterpiece. Any of these three could have taken the hit, but for me, the most poetic and most canon consistent answer is Whitebeard. The man was already dying, and if it meant saving Ace one last time, he'd do it without hesitation. So let's say that's the timeline we get. Whitebeard sees Ace about to sacrifice himself for Luffy, and this time, he moves first. This twist changes more than Ace's fate. It breaks the timeline wide open, because in this version of Marineford, Blackbeard doesn't kill Whitebeard, which means he doesn't automatically get the Tremor fruit. Now sure, Akainu's the one who lands the final blow in this version, but that doesn't mean he's suddenly walking away with Whitebeard's fruit. Let's be real, Akainu's so obsessed with magma, he probably thinks earthquakes are for hippies. Even if he wanted the fruit, he wouldn't be able to use it. As far as we know, Blackbeard is still the only person in history who can hold multiple devil fruits. And that's what makes this moment so important. Whether it happens now or later, Blackbeard getting Whitebeard's fruit is the real turning point. It confirms what we've all suspected all along. There's something fundamentally wrong with this man.
That boy ain't right.
But here's the thing, in the original timeline, Blackbeard gets the fruit because he's left alone with Whitebeard's body. Perfect timing, no interference. If Akainu is the one who kills Whitebeard instead, that window probably never opens. You think Akainu is just gonna stand aside and let this greasy SpongeBob villain rummage through corpses like it's Black Friday at a Best Buy? So if Blackbeard doesn't get the fruit at Marineford, when does he? Here's the perfect opportunity. The post-war at-sea funeral. In canon, Luffy and Rayleigh returned to Marineford to pay their respects, which means the battlefield was pretty much abandoned by the time they got there. Let's be honest, if pre-timeskip Luffy could sneak in with no resistance, you know Blackbeard could have walked in like he owned the place. But here's the twist, if Ace is alive, that funeral never happens. Luffy has no reason to return. So instead of the straw-hatted pirates showing up, we get the Blackbeard pirates. No guards, no witnesses, just a body and a plan. Since Ace never dies in this timeline, Luffy doesn't have his mental breakdown. No blood-curdling scream, no flashbacks to childhood, no total collapse in Jinbei's arms. Whitebeard's death would have still hit hard, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as having your brother die in your arms. And without that collapse, there's no need for Law to save him. Which raises the question, what was Law even doing there in the first place? Did he just roll up like, yo, anyone need emergency heart surgery? But here's what's really interesting. Luffy never passes out, which means he's conscious when Shanks arrives to stop the war. Let that sink in. The man who inspired him to become the Pirate King, the man who gave him his hat, walks onto the battlefield, hockey flaring, stopping to Yonko like he's ordering takeout. Yeah, I'll take a number 4 with a side of fries to go. Luffy would have been stunned, starstruck, probably grinning through the blood. And you already know, Shanks would have said something vague and profound like, "You're 1,000 years too early." So instead of ending the war unconscious and broken, Luffy ends it inspired, not just hurt, but motivated. So now Luffy is not on life support. He's conscious, hurting, but thinking clearly, and his first instinct? Reunite with the crew, because if the war taught him anything, it's that he can't do this alone, not against admirals, not against warlords, and definitely not in the new world. So instead of sending the coded message through the newspaper, Luffy gets to meet his crew face to face. They get the chance to actually talk, to hug, and to plan. And when your captain, bloodied and bruised, looks you in the eye and says, "We need to be stronger," that hits different. Honestly, with Luffy rallying the crew personally, they might have trained harder, pushed further, grown even stronger than they did in canon. Zoro would have trained with Mihawk blindfolded underwater. And finally, we get to Ace, arguably the most interesting follow of all, because this man was supposed to be dead, and now he's not. One of the biggest questions becomes, who leads the Whitebeard pirates now? The obvious answer is Marco, 1st Division Commander, the number 1, literally. And if anyone forgot their math, 1 is greater than 2. But Ace, he's got that Gold D Roger blood in him, that fire, that pride, and let's be honest, man's temper has more spikes than a Sea King on leg day.
No, God!
So in canon he chased Blackbeard across the world just for killing Thatch and stealing a fruit. So what do you think he would do to the guy who stole his father's life and power? Here's where things get messy, because Marco and Ace wouldn't agree on how to handle this. Marco's the calm, calculated medic turned leader. He waited a year before leading the payback war. Ace, he would have been ready for revenge before the smoke even cleared. And you can bet at least half the crew would side with Ace. The Whitebeard pirates wouldn't just be grieving, they'd be split. And maybe Ace would have had to get his butt kicked twice before finally learning his lesson. The silver lining? Marco survived the payback war, so odds are Ace would survive too. And maybe after getting wrecked again, he'd finally realize he couldn't beat Blackbeard alone. That's when Marco and Ace reconcile, 2 halves of a broken crew, reforged through shared loss, and finally united by purpose. Revenge wouldn't be about rage anymore, it'd be about legacy, and maybe, just maybe, they'd actually win. In like 5 years when we finally get the final saga. But Ace surviving doesn't just rewrite the fate of the Whitebeard pirates, it rewrites the fate of Wano, because now he would be able to fulfill the promises he made years ago. Here's another big one. If Akainu kills Whitebeard, he becomes the hero of Marineford. The Gorosei are so impressed that Akainu gets the promotion directly from the higher-ups. No debate about the next fleet admiral between Aokiji and Akainu. No debate means no 10-day battle, no volcanic wasteland, no ice continent, no Punk Hazard. And without the distress call from Punk Hazard, Luffy never meets Momo. And if that never happens, maybe the Mink Ninja Samurai Alliance also never happens. Next up, the Flame fruit never reappears. Doflamingo never offers it in the Dressrosa Coliseum, which, by the way, how did he even get that fruit? Were they just handing out Logias at the supermarket? No fruit on the line means Sabo probably never shows up in Dressrosa, and that means no reunion. In this timeline, Sabo and Luffy never reunite in the Coliseum. Instead, all three brothers reunite on the battlefield when the revolutionaries take part in their war against the world government. 3 brothers, 1 war, no plot armor required. Well, maybe a little. Sabo's gonna need it. Man's raw dogging the final war with nothing but hockey like he's Zoro, but with a lot of heavy past trauma. And then there's Edward Weevil, the self-proclaimed son of Whitebeard who rampaged unopposed in the canon timeline. Only reason he got away with it? The Whitebeard remnants were too scattered after the payback war to deal with them. Now that Ace is alive, that fake Whitebeard Jr. ain't making it to episode 2 of the spin-off. Ain't no way he's letting some failed Giga Chad stain his dad's legacy. And remember how I mentioned in this timeline the Straw Hats don't meet Momo on Punk Hazard? Well, you might be thinking, well, how do the Straw Hats make their way to Wano? Well, just like he promised Tama, Ace returns to Wano and eventually challenges Kaido. Or at least tries to. Because, let's be real, Ace isn't the main character. No plot armor, no rubbery physics, no power of Nakamas. So while Luffy's stuck in Whole Cake chasing after Sanji, Ace gets flattened by Kaido, tossed into the labor camp, and it's actually Ace's Vivre card that leads the Straw Hats to Wano instead of Momo. And instead of the Samurai Mink Ninja Pirate Alliance, we get an alliance between the Straw Hats and the Whitebeard Pirates, now officially called the Fire Fist Pirates, to liberate Wano. But this is where it gets really interesting, because now we have to talk about Jinbei. His loyalty to Ace ran so deep, he went to Impel down for refusing to fight against him. Sure, he respects Luffy, but would he really abandon Ace to join him? In my honest opinion, I don't think Jinbei would. So if Jinbei stays with Ace, that leaves the Straw Hats in need of a new helmsman. But who? Here's a wild but fitting answer: Yamato. Why? Because she's the symbolic reincarnation of Odin. And just like Odin once sailed with Whitebeard before following Roger, Yamato could follow the same path. In our alternate universe, Ace survives, so Yamato starts her journey alongside him, honoring her bond and following Odin's literal footsteps. But eventually she meets Luffy, the man Ace has been telling her stories about, the one chasing true freedom, the one carrying Roger's will. And like Odin before her, Yamato realizes her destiny lies not with the past, but with the future. She leaves Ace's ship as Odin left Whitebeard's and joins the Straw Hats as Odin joined Roger. Not just as a helmsman, but as a symbol. Because in this world, Yamato doesn't just follow Odin's journey, she completes it. And that's how one life, one survival, changed the entire course of history. From Whitebeard's death to Yamato's future, Ace's survival reshaped the world in ways that would never be the same ever again.